How does a person make such an impact in their own time that their name is still on the lips of the world 4,500 years later? That's the question that I want to answer today. And to do that, we have to go back to a time period of kings and city-states when rulers like Sargon and Gilgamesh jump off the historical page and into our modern imaginations. These are people who ruled through strength of arms. So surely anybody from this time period that's still remembered would have done the same. And yet, the person we talk about today didn't have any of those advantages. He wasn't a ruler or a king. He was just a man with a mind far ahead of his time. The only place his name was preserved was carved into monuments to his kings. In the ancient Greek imagination, almost 2,000 years after he lived, he was known through myth and legend as a god of medicine. And in the modern day, he's known to us as well in mass media. Today, we unravel the scroll of Imhotep. Through his life, his legacy, and his deification, I want to find out what we can learn about ourselves and humanity on the whole in the process. Imhotep's life is something of a mystery. Due to the dual factors of the passage of time and the recording practices of the era, little to nothing is known about Imhotep's early life. Even his greatest exploits are just fragments pieced together from later sources. But there are some things that we do know for certain. According to later members of his cult, Imhotep was born a commoner, with no hereditary advantages levied upon him at birth. So how would someone of his upbringing reach the eventual heights that he would? Well, contrary to the norm of the time, Imhotep would earn every ounce of status with his mind. Through his later achievements, we can work backward to infer things about how Imhotep came into his position. We know that in his ascendant years, Imhotep was the high priest of Ptah, the creator god in Egyptian mythology. As with all ancient civilizations, the priesthood held a certain high esteem. Notably, if a person is lent the legitimacy of speaking for a god, then their words tend to carry a little bit more weight. Here, we can imagine a young Imhotep as the keeper of a local temple, dispensing advice under the guise of divine blessings and earning favor in his area. This credibility might earn him higher positions in the priesthood, which would grow his influence further. Eventually, word would have reached King Djoser, the ruler of the era's, ears of a priest who the gods spoke to like no other in the kingdom. Naturally, he would seek out Imhotep as an advisor. Just as a brief aside for definition of terms, I am using the term king to refer to Djoser here because of the practices of the time. The term pharaoh, though it was used to refer to the royal palace at the time, wouldn't be adopted until far later in Egyptian society for the ruler themselves. But all of this is only a theory based off of his later life, and I'd be doing you a disservice not to mention here that even Imhotep's status as being a commoner at birth is in question. As I stated earlier, it's only according to his cult from over a millennia after his death that we know much of this information at all. And so, Imhotep's early life will remain forever shrouded in the mists of time. But with that in mind, we know that once Imhotep did gain the king's favor, he thrived in the position. Imhotep is remembered for his achievements in the realms of both the spiritual and the physical. Later sources claimed he delved into astronomical divinations detailing the movement of the stars. And he maintained the status of the high priest of Ra Heliopolis as well as the high priest of Ptah. But Imhotep's greatest claims to fame came in two forms. For one, he's more well known. The idea that he is responsible for the construction of the step pyramid at Saqqara. This is the crowning achievement which defined Imhotep in the public's imagination for much of the past few centuries, and undoubtedly the one which earned him the title showered upon him in the inscription on King Djoser's statue. The Royal Seal Bearer, Great of Seers, Overseer of Sculptors. The advancement from early mastabas to the polished cut stones used to construct the step pyramid are marked advancement in the technology of the time. But we can only guess that Imhotep was the chief architect based off of the latter title on the statue. But if he was indeed the architect behind their design, then he laid the metaphorical groundwork for all pyramids to follow, eventually culminating in the Great Pyramid of Giza rising from the stone base of the desert long after his death. Imhotep's greatest achievement, though, at least in my mind, is one thing we know about him with a high degree of certainty. Detailed in a copy of Imhotep's medical notes found more than a millennia after his death, the Edwin Smith Papyrus cements his legacy. In this document, Imhotep, not the architect, not the priest, but the physician and the scribe, detailed an understanding of disease like a person born in the modern day. He lays out ailments and treatments in a fashion never before seen, which, though the knowledge would be preserved, would not be expanded upon or truly understood until around the time he was worshipped as a god, and the details of his life drifted away on the winds like the sand in the desert. In this document, Imhotep thought of disease differently. He addressed it as something to be treated that was not a divine punishment but an unavoidable facet of life. I want to take a moment to reflect on what it meant to the people of the time to have a chief physician and vizier to the king take this stance. Many of you may not need to imagine suffering from a disease. The understanding that your ailment may well take your life might pale in comparison to the pain that you endure each day. Now imagine everyone around you blaming you for your own suffering. Imagine the prevalent belief of the time being that you'd wronged the gods somehow and deserved your fate. How alienating and isolating the feeling must have been as your loved ones abandoned you one by one to die alone. Imhotep revolutionized treatments for disease in ancient Egypt, but ancient medicine of the time was still extremely limited. Most would still perish from their ailments, or go on to suffer for the remainder of their life with no hope for a cure. No, more important than the treatments themselves was a change in mindset to care for the ill rather than to shun them. Imhotep would go on to live a full life. We know this because not only is his name found at the base of King Djoser's statue, but it's also found at the base of the buried half-finished pyramid of the subsequent king. But these two inscriptions are the only two things that we have of Imhotep from the time period that he actually lived in. And so, that ends the story of Imhotep the man. But there is a reason his name still survives to this day. That document, the Edwin Smith Papyrus, it's the only piece of Imhotep's writing which has survived into the modern era. But the virtue of a copy of his work existing so long after his death alone is evidence that he must have produced an enormous body of work on the subject. Imhotep was an accomplished and prolific scribe, and that is what kept his legacy alive through ancient Egypt. In the middle 2nd century BCE, we begin to have evidence of Imhotep's worship as a demigod. His cult formed with the idea that he was a god of healing. And finally, by the 1st century BCE, Imhotep was worshipped as a full deity, viewed as the son of Ptah and a member of the Egyptian pantheon of gods, poetically serving alongside the creator god he was a priest under. We could touch on Imhotep's modern depiction in media, which has very little in common with either the man or the deity, but I'd like to close with a visit to the ancient minds who worshipped Imhotep 2 millennia after his death. Contemporaneous accounts of the time reported worshippers resting at Imhotep's temple in Philae, holding clay replicas of organs in their hands and praying for their ailments to be healed. There is a certain irony that a man who had dedicated a portion of his life to reversing the stigma attached to illness by way of divinity would then be worshipped as a god. But I think to demonize belief on the whole here would be misguided. In a way, this image of the sick and needy turning to Imhotep, a deity who's not judging, not condemning, but who's believed to be caring for the ailing, holds a certain beauty within it. Though Imhotep's way of thinking about medicine wouldn't be widely adopted until thousands of years after his death, when Hippocrates claimed the mantle of the father of modern medicine, Imhotep had won another battle. Through his writings and his eventual worship, he'd changed the way that people think about illness. Society, though it has had backsteps and pitfalls through the eras of human history, is built up through technological advancements. Imhotep produced architectural and medical advancements that furthered humanity's march of progress. But much the same way that he taught humanity to cut stone and build greater structures, he laid the groundwork for social advancements as well. It's funny to think about with our modern understanding, but new gods arising in the ancient world was a reflection of a change in the values of the people. So, for even a fragmentary recollection of the man that once was to be the thing to assume this mantle might well have been the finest legacy one could imagine. And that's all I have. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the video, first of all, and second of all, I'm experimenting with different video formats, so let me know what you thought of this one. You can drop a comment below, you can leave a like, or you could even subscribe to the channel if you liked it enough. And that's it. Thank you so much, and until next time, see ya.